news you can use.
Welcome to another edition of The Scoop, where we're providing news that we hope our audience can use in their daily lives or be able to let their relatives or friends know about. I'm Louise Thompson. I'm the Executive Director of Tampa Bay Community Network, a public access television station. You can find us at www.tbcn.org. With me today is Betsy Edwards. She's the Public Affairs Coordinator for the LifeLink Foundation based out of Tampa, and she's going to tell us about LifeLink and what it does. Welcome,
Thank
Betty.
you very much.
Thank you so much for being here. Betsy, tell me the history and the services provided by LifeLink.
Okay. Basically, LifeLink of Florida, we're the local not-for-profit organ recovery agency here in the Tampa Bay community. We specifically, LifeLink of Florida is responsible for the 16-county service area covering West and Southwest Florida. And we are part of the LifeLink Foundation, and basically our mission is to facilitate organ recoveries, to go for organ transplants, and help save the lives of the over 100,000 individuals right now in the United States awaiting a transplant.
100,000, how many in Florida?
Specifically here in the state of Florida, we have over 3,700, and just in the Tampa Bay area alone, over 600 individuals awaiting a life-saving transplant.
How long has LifeLink been doing this?
LifeLink Foundation has actually been in existence for over 26 years. We celebrated our 25th anniversary a year ago in December.
Tell me, I know that, daily you read new medical things. And I don't know, how many types of organs now are being transplanted?
Well, through the gifts of one organ donor, up to 8 lives can be saved, and that would be your lungs, kidneys, pancreas, small intestine, heart, and liver. And in addition to that, actually through the gifts of an organ and tissue donor, up to 60 lives can be affected, because that increases to bone for reconstructive surgery, skin for burn victims, tendons and ligaments, and corneas to restore sight. Okay,
and then there are multiple transplants too, because you mentioned earlier having more than one thing transplanted at one time.
Yes, oftentimes that'll come. Typically, that's more the case for pediatric recipients where they're in need of multiple organ transplants, including the small intestine as well. And then you do have some other cases where people need heart and lungs, or heart and kidney, or heart and liver.
Are they done simultaneously when that happens, or that depends on whether their availability?
Well, it depends on what the specific organs are going for transplant, but typically, yes, they're going to be going one right after the other.
Oh, in the same surgery
yes.
day or something like that?
Oh, yes, most definitely.
If a patient did get both organs, they would have less likelihood of surviving whatever is happening with them?
Well, for the majority of our patients, normally it's just a single organ transplant. You're talking about a heart transplant, a lung, or liver, or something like that. In the rarer case of somebody who needs, say, a heart and lung or a heart and kidney, it would go one right after the other. The reason being, if they're getting the transplant at the same time, from the time the organs are recovered for transplant until the time they're transplanted into that patient, there is a very short window of time that those organs are
viable?
Yes, exactly.
And you were saying that with certain organs you may just have hours?
Yes, typically with, say, specifically like heart, lungs, or liver, you're looking at a window of time from 4 to 6 hours. Kidneys, however, have a little bit longer, what they call cold time, meaning outside of the body, and that can be 24 to 48 hours. But so given for the other organs that short time frame, the transplants are going to take place one right after the other.
Is there a need more for certain organs over others? Like, the demand, you said there are like 600 people waiting. Are they waiting mostly for lungs or heart?
Mostly for kidneys. Of the transplant waiting list, those 101,000 individuals I was talking to you about earlier, over 70% of that list is specifically for kidneys.
Why is that happening?
Because
more and more people on dialysis.
More and more people on dialysis.
Is this
kidney
the result
failure.
more and more of diabetes or these kinds of things? Because we've read
diabetes,
about
hypertension.
Those kinds of increases. Yeah.
Most definitely. The thing about that, though, is, and this is very fortunate, Because there is such a demand for kidneys, you can do living donation as well, because obviously we all have two kidneys and you can donate one to somebody else. So that helps a little bit.
Is that the only organ that we can donate and be alive?
No, you can actually donate a portion of your liver in addition to a lobe of one of your lungs, and that can be done through living donation. But when you're talking about heart and the whole liver, pancreas and small intestine, those come from cadaveric donors, people who've already passed away.
How does it all get classified when you need something?
You mean in terms of getting listed for transplant?
Yeah, how do you get listed?
Basically what would happen is when you have an individual who's going into end-stage organ failure, their general physician or their specialist, their cardiologist or pulmonologist would refer them to a transplant center. In this case here in this area, it would be likely they would get referred to the LifeLink Healthcare Institute. The transplant center being at Tampa General Hospital. That's where the actual transplants take place. Once that happens, that individual then goes through extensive testing to make sure, number one, that they're healthy enough to survive the transplant, and number two, to make sure that they're going to be able to take care of that transplant afterwards, including following doctor's orders and taking their immunosuppressant medications consistently and per doctor's orders.
Once a doctor has recommended this, now the person has to be classified somehow, right?
Well, what it is once they go through all that testing and it's determined that they are suitable to go on to the national transplant waiting list.
Immunosuppressants.
Right. Typically, they have insurance and all of that. They'll go on to the national transplant waiting list, and that actually is coast to coast nationally. They go on to that, and then from there, people are listed based on how sick they are and what their need is. And then when we have a donor in in a local hospital here, say we have someone who passed away at Tampa General Hospital, they had designated on their driver's license they wanted to be an organ donor, and they are in an accident, they progress to brain death. When donation becomes an option, what would then happen is their medical information goes into the United Network for Organ Sharing, regulates the transplant waiting list. All of their information goes into that, and then they would match up the donor to a suitable recipient waiting.
I want to hear more about how that goes, and I know there's a tremendous amount of myths out there about this whole process of being an organ donor, and we're going to hear more from you about all that, and we'll answer those questions as soon as we're back. Welcome back. This is The Scoop. I'm Louise Thompson, the Executive Director of Tampa Bay Community Network in Tampa, Florida, www.tbcn.org. And with me is Betsy Edwards, who's with LifeLink Foundation, based out of Tampa, but serving 16 counties and then some. Betsy was talking to us about transplants and how LifeLink helps with that process with lots of folks here in Florida. I wanted, before the break, I was suggested that we talk about myths, because there's so many of them.
Several.
I know that people think that if they get listed, it's going to cost their family a lot of money to be a donor. Is that true?
Well, when you're talking about getting listed, individuals who...
Listed as a donor. I'm sorry, not listed. Yeah.
Okay. Once an individual has designated themselves as an organ and tissue donor by joining Florida's State Organ Donor Registry, in the event that they pass away and they have the opportunity to become a donor, there's no cost whatsoever associated to either that individual or their family.
Okay.
It's a
now,
free
how
gift
do you
to
get
give.
listed? You just said that. No, wait, let me just go back to that for a second. How do you get listed?
The easiest way to join Florida's Organ and Tissue Donor Registry is by next time you go down to the DMV office, check that box you want to be an organ donor and get it onto your driver's license. In addition to that, though, if you didn't get that chance while you were at the DMV, or if you want to do it now and you don't want to go down to the DMV, you don't need to renew your license, you can also complete a organ and tissue donor registration form that then gets mailed into the state and puts you onto the state registry.
Can you do this online too?
Unfortunately, right now you cannot. However, coming closer to the end of the summer, Florida's Organ and Tissue Donor Registry will be going online, and people will have that option as well.
Is there we will probably run it if there is. There's a number for the Florida Organ Registry, correct?
If anyone, say anybody who's watching this program right now wants to join the registry, they can actually contact us at LifeLink, ask for the Public Affairs Department, and that's 800-262-5775. And they can request a form, or they can also download a registration form at our website, www.lifelinkfound.org.
Okay. Another myth is, if I have this on my, I think it's a myth, but so you can dispel it. But if I'm registered and it's on my driver's license and I'm in an accident, will they give me up quicker than save my life?
Well, there's good news. That is a myth.
Okay.
It's not true, and you're not the only one that's thought that or heard that. And as a matter of fact, organ donation never, ever, ever even becomes an option until every last life-saving effort has been made to save a patient's life. And in addition to that, you're talking about dying at the scene of an accident. If an individual passes away at the scene of an accident, the option for organ donation will not even come into play.
Even if it's on their driver's license?
Yes. The reason being because organ donation can only take place when an individual has progressed to brain death and they're in a hospital on a ventilator where even after that individual has passed away, there still is an artificial means to keep their heart pumping and blood perfusing through the organs to keep them viable for transplant. But tissue donation is an option.
There's something new.
Yes.
Who knew that?
So
That's a regulation under the statute that governs transplantation? That you have to be in the hospital and all of that?
No, I wouldn't say that's a statute, but what it is that organ donation is only, unless you're doing a living donation, we were talking earlier about kidneys or a portion of your liver. When we're talking about individuals who have passed away and become organ donors, they have to be in a hospital because without blood perfusing through those organs, they're not viable for transplantation. So that's why. And individuals, typically brain death is a progression. So once an individual has come in from some type of motorcycle accident or some fall to their head, it's a progression. So when they do progress to brain death, which is your legal time of death, it's actually declared by 2 doctors. Once that is declared, they're still on a ventilator, they've been intubated, so their organs are still viable for transplant, so donation is an option.
I've heard people say that it's against a lot of religions. Is that true?
No, it's not. In fact, all major religions are in support of donation. They see it as an act of generosity, and it's an individual giving a gift to help save the life of another.
And what about the length of time it may take? Can a funeral service or whatever traditional service that particular religion uses happen quickly?
Yes, organ donation.
And could they have a full showing if that's what their belief system is at a funeral home?
Yes, they can. In fact, organ donation typically will take place very quickly after an individual has been pronounced brain dead, because again, we're against the clock. We're racing against time to get those organs for transplant for the patients that are waiting. So it takes place quickly. It doesn't interfere with funeral arrangements. As a matter of fact, you can be a full organ and tissue donor, and unless the family chose to reveal that at the funeral, at an open casket funeral, individuals would never know. The reason being, your organs are all in your abdominal cavity. Your rib cage keeps everything intact, and then when it comes to tissue donation, once the tissues are recovered for transplant, they actually replace that with prosthetics, so the body still keeps its general shape.
So the form is still there, and you don't see anything that would make you feel that there was some deformity that took place as a result.
Not at all.
What about people believing that in order to get an organ donated, you'd be down on the list from, let's say, a celebrity?
That is not true either, and I'm glad you brought that up because some people do think that. The 101,000 individuals currently on our national transplant waiting list that we were talking about earlier, which is regulated by the United Network for Organ Sharing, it's actually a computerized system, and the beauty of that is it ensures that it's the sickest and those that are most in need who are receiving those transplants. And not only does it not matter if you're a celebrity, it doesn't matter how much money you have, if you're a local politician, if you know somebody, it's all computerized and it ensures that it is the sickest. Because again, we have such a shortage of available organs for transplant, we want to make sure it's the sickest that are getting those.
I want to hear more about how how this is prioritized, and you know how the decision is made where they fall on this database list, how that all occurs. But we're going to have to take a short break.
Okay.
And we'll be back in just a minute. Stay tuned. You're back with The Scoop. I'm Louise Thompson, Executive Director of Tampa Bay Community Network. I'm with Betsy Edwards, who's with the LifeLink Foundation, and she's been talking to us about that LifeLink and transplants and organ donations. How do they classify you? Like you said earlier, the sickest, or
yes.
How does it end up? You know, you're 10th down on the list, but maybe it's not a match. What happens?
When you're talking about individuals, though, say we have a donor, but their blood type or tissue typing or whatever doesn't match the sickest person, the #1 person on the top of the list, they'll start working their way down until they find the best suitable match in terms of the waiting recipient to that individual who is becoming a donor.
That sounds more sensible than this human trafficking in organs.
Yes, human trafficking.
What do you know what you're getting if you do something like that?
Well, that's the beauty of living in the United States, and that's the beauty of the United Network for Organ Sharing regulating that transplant waiting list. Human trafficking is illegal in the United States. It is illegal to buy or sell an organ for transplant. And so that doesn't happen, and the way that we ensure the safety of the organs that do go for transplant is, again, because we have our donors, we do extensive testing on them in terms of their medical and social history. We check for diseases, we check for viruses, and we do everything we can to ensure the organs that go for transplant are safe for our patients.
There, over the years, we've been doing this 26 years, you said, has the rejection rate decreased even more now that we know more? Or,
yes.
How are we saving more people or for some longer period of time?
They're definitely the transplant success rates and the years that people are going on after receiving a new heart or receiving a new liver, or even receiving a new kidney, are getting longer and longer and longer because of the medical advances that we're making with today's technology and everything that we do know, and the fact that immunosuppressant medications are getting better and better. As a matter of fact, we have a kidney recipient with LifeLink's program that is 20 plus years out from transplant, and that's not so uncommon to hear about anymore.
That's fantastic.
It gets longer and longer. It's wonderful.
So you said 101,000 people in the United States are on the list right now. Mm-hmm. You don't get on the list if some things can preclude you, correct, from being on the list?
You have to prove that you're following medical guidelines, you're not drinking alcohol, you're not partaking in drug use, you're staying healthy, eating the right things, and keeping yourself as healthy as possible given the circumstances. Selling myths is huge because it is when people have heard something, or particularly with some of our older generations now, they have all of these things they've heard for years and years and years, and they think it's true. They think they're going to let you die at the hospital if you're an organ donor. They think
it's going to cost their families
exactly.
a lot of money, whatever.
So it's very important to dispel those myths, because those are what are hindering individuals from joining Florida's Organ and Tissue Donor Registry. So in addition to that, we're out in the community. We work out in the community every single day to educate the public on the importance of donation and how they can make a decision to become an organ donor by joining Florida's Organ and Tissue Donor Registry, whether at the DMV office or by completing a registration form and then mailing it into the state.
So if there are people out there who are sort of on the I don't know, border about it. You know, I think I should do that, but then, I don't know. I have heard those things, and yeah, maybe she dispelled them. How do you overcome that? What would you say that seems to make people really want to do it?
I would say once you get past the initial dispelling myths and answering specific questions of why people specifically are against it, I really just think what I always share with people is, and I can say this firsthand, I've personally witnessed the miracle of transplantation. My dad received a kidney pancreas transplant a little bit over 6 years ago, and that's how I got introduced to organ and tissue donation and to LifeLink, and now I'm doing this every day. And I think the one thing I think is so important for people to realize is giving the gift of life is the most precious gift you can give. And the beauty of organ donation is it's a life-saving gift that you can give to somebody else, but it's one you don't have to give until after you're no longer in need. You've already passed away, you're not in need of that. And what better legacy to leave than one of having saved another's life? We all wonder how people are going to remember us, and I personally think no better way to be remembered than having given the gift of life.
What about in terms of people who are living and can do one kidney? Do we have enough of those as well, or is that's a decision that's made by a family at the last moment, or that
Are
kind
you
of
talking
thing?
about living donation?
Living donation.
Living donation is not made by a family at the last moment, because living donation, again, kidneys being the most common, that's something that's actually planned out in advance. And if an individual, typically it's normally friends and family of individuals who need those transplants that would go get tested and see if they would be a suitable match. And then they would go, once the match was made, the donation would take place. Now, when you were talking though about decisions being made at the last moment, that's why it's so important for individuals to designate their wishes as donors, so that in the event that they are in a situation where they have the opportunity to become a donor, their family isn't left with that last minute decision while dealing with the grief of having just lost a loved one. They can look and say, my loved one had it on their driver's license, my loved one had joined the registry, this is what they wanted, so let's make it happen.
And they probably should have discussed that ahead of time
That
as well.
it is so important
that
to discuss
it's
that
not,
before.
It's not something that's a big shock to someone. We have only just a couple of seconds left here. Is there something else you want to make sure we convey?
I think just the most important thing is, after having heard this today, go home, talk it over with your family, make sure your loved ones know exactly what you would want done when you pass away, and join Florida's Organ and Tissue Donor Registry. It takes you 30 seconds, and it's a gift that lives on forever.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Betsy,
you.
for telling everybody this. And thank you all for being tuned in. We'll see you next time on The Scoop, and visit our website, www.tbcn.org. Thank you.
News you can use.